Welcome back to Dear Jordan. It's been a while. Over the past couple of months, I've stepped away from the microphone, not because I had nothing to say, but because I needed to listen. I needed to properly mourn. I needed to allow myself the space to heal instead of constantly trying to push through it. For most of my life, I believed that making myself a priority somehow meant I was taking something away from everyone else. But I'm learning that caring for myself isn't selfish. It's necessary. If I'm going to continue to show up for my children, for my family, for the people I coach, and for all of you who faithfully listen each week, then I have to allow God to restore me first. Even Jesus withdrew from the crowds to rest, to pray, and simply be with the Father. If the Son of God made space for renewal, then maybe we should stop apologizing for needing it too. As I sat with God over these past few months, I realized something. Healing doesn't always happen because life gets easier. Sometimes healing happens because life reveals another place in our hearts that still need God's attention. And that's exactly what today's letter is about. So, grab yourself a cup of coffee and let's listen in. Dear Jordan, there are moments in life when something happens that seems completely unrelated to your past, and yet somehow it reaches into places you didn't even realize were still hurting. People call that being triggered. For someone who has experienced trauma, a trigger can feel like you've suddenly been transported back to a version of yourself you thought you already had left behind. Your thoughts race. Your emotions become louder than your logic. Sometimes your body reacts before your mind even understands why. I know that feeling well, but I've never believed that healing means avoiding every trigger. I don't think the people around us should spend their lives walking on eggshells so we never have to feel uncomfortable. I actually think the opposite. I think our triggers introduce us to places that still need healing. Psychology tells us that our brains are designed to recognize danger. The amygdala, the part of our brain responsible for detecting threats, often reacts before the logical part of our brain has time to evaluate whether we're actually unsafe. That's why something seemingly small can produce such a big emotional response. Our nervous system is responding to old information while our mind is trying to understand new circumstances. That doesn't mean we're broken. It means we're human. And if we're willing to stay with that discomfort instead of running from it, our triggers can become invitations instead of obstacles. They reveal wounds we thought we had healed simply because we stopped looking at them. I think that's one of the reasons David prayed in Psalm 139, "Search me, O God, and know my heart. See if there is any offensive way in me." He wasn't asking God to shame him. He was asking God to reveal what still needed healing. I've come to believe that's one of the bravest prayers we can pray. Growing up, my relationship with my father was complicated. It wasn't entirely bad. It wasn't everything a little girl hopes for either. As a teenager, I witnessed things that didn't fit the picture I had of what a father should be. That disappointment slowly became resentment. Left alone long enough, resentment eventually became hatred. Hatred is a dangerous thing. I don't think people realize how quietly it settles into your heart. I've always imagined it like carrying a bundle of thorn branches. At first, they hurt every time you hold them. Eventually, you become so accustomed to carrying them that you convince yourself they're a part of who you are. Letting go means you'll bleed all over again. So instead, you simply learn to carry the weight. For a long time, that's exactly what I did. Then life handed me something even heavier. When your Uncle Timothy died, my entire world broke apart. His death forced me to ask myself a question I had never even considered before. If I was going to survive the greatest loss I'd ever experienced, how could I continue carrying every other wound, too? Somewhere in my early 20s, I decided I didn't want hatred to define me anymore. Forgiveness wasn't pretending nothing happened. It wasn't excusing anyone. It wasn't rewriting history. It was deciding that someone else's choices would no longer determine the condition of my own heart. Psychology has taught us that unresolved resentment often grows through repeated injuries that are never processed. Every disappointment adds another layer until you're no longer responding to one event. You're responding to years of accumulated pain. Scripture warned us about that long before psychology gave it a name. Hebrews 12 says, "See to it that no bitter root grows up to cause trouble." Roots grow underground. You don't notice them at first, but eventually they begin lifting foundations. That's what bitterness does. When I finally admitted that there had been a season where I hated my parents, one received my honesty with understanding. The other received it with offense. That was another lesson. Healing is not dependent upon someone agreeing with your experience. Sometimes people genuinely cannot see the wounds they helped create. If your healing depends on their acknowledgement, you'll spend the rest of your life waiting for something they may never be capable of giving. The truth is, I wasn't neglected physically. I always had food, I had clothes, I had a roof over my head. From the outside, everything looked perfectly fine. But emotional presence is different than physical provision. I wasn't looking for someone to solve every problem. I wanted conversations, guidance, someone to wonder what was happening inside my mind, someone to ask what I was afraid of, someone to ask what I dreamed about, someone to notice that quiet children still have loud thoughts. Developmental psychology tells us that children don't simply need food and shelter to survive. They also need emotional attunement. That's when a parent notices your emotions, helps you understand them, and responds consistently enough that your nervous system learns, I'm safe. Someone is here. Hyper-independent children often fool the adults around them. People mistake competence for wholeness. They assume the child who isn't causing problems must not have any. But some of the quietest children are carrying the loudest questions. I was one of them. And I think that's why Psalm 34 has become so meaningful to me. The Lord is close to the brokenhearted, not just because he fixes things, because he stays close. Presence has always been one of God's greatest gifts. So when someone finally paid attention to me, really paid attention to me, I believed it. Not because I was foolish, because I was hungry. There's a difference. I wasn't looking for romance. I was looking to feel seen. Emotional neglect didn't determine the choices I would eventually make, but it did make me more vulnerable to confusing attention with love. Psychologists have found that when people grow up emotionally unseen, they often become especially responsive to anyone who offers validation, curiosity, or understanding. That's not weakness. That's how human beings are wired. We were created for connection. Unfortunately, unhealthy people understand that too. Some people learn your story because they want to love you. Others learn your story because it gives them access to you. That's one of the hardest lessons I have ever learned. Being seen is not the same thing as being safe. Jesus saw people everywhere he went. He saw the woman at the well. He saw Zacchaeus hiding in a tree. He saw the woman who had suffered for 12 years. He saw people no one else noticed. But Jesus never used what he learned about people to gain power over them. He used what he knew to restore them. That's how you recognize the difference between love and manipulation. Love protects. Manipulation collects information. For a long time, I was embarrassed by how deeply I believed people. I thought everyone's word carried the same weight mine did. I thought honesty was simply what people did. Life taught me otherwise. Not everyone values truth equally. Some people use words to build trust. Others use words to build opportunity. That realization hurt me, but it also matured me. Romans 12 says, if it is possible, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. I used to think that meant making everyone happy. Now I understand something different. It means I'm responsible for the condition of my own heart, not someone else's willingness to acknowledge what happened. It means I am responsible for the condition of my own heart, not someone else's willingness to acknowledge what happened. Jordan, people are going to disappoint you, not because they're all bad, because they're human. Even good people will sometimes fall short. They won't always understand you. They won't always meet your expectations. They won't always know how to love you the way you need to be loved. But don't let disappointment convince you to chase affection from anyone who simply makes you feel noticed. Don't confuse attention with love. Don't confuse consistency with intensity. Don't confuse being chosen with being cherished, and never confuse being seen with being safe. The safest relationships won't simply notice your heart. They'll protect it once they find it. Scripture tells us in 1 Corinthians 13 that love is patient, love is kind. It does not seek its own, and it always protects. Real love protects. It never requires you to become smaller just to keep someone else comfortable. And because you belong to Christ, you never have to chase love from people who ask you to abandon yourself just to receive it. The safest love you will ever know isn't the person who notices you first. It's the God who knew you before you were ever formed, who has never manipulated your heart, never abandoned your soul, and never once asked you to earn his affection. That's where I hope you always begin. I love you with all the love I am still learning how to give. Sincerely, your mom. Thank you for spending this time with me today. If today's letter resonated with you, I hope it reminded you of something important. Healing isn't measured by how rarely you're triggered. Sometimes it's measured by what you choose to do when you are. Our triggers don't always mean we're moving backward. Sometimes they're simply revealing another place where God is still inviting us into freedom. So don't be discouraged if you're still healing. Don't be discouraged if grief still catches you by surprise. Don't be discouraged if you're discovering parts of yourself that still need compassion. God isn't intimidated by the places you're still working through. He's faithful enough to meet you there. If this episode encouraged you, I hope you'll share it with someone who may need the reminder that being seen is not the same thing as being safe, and that real healing doesn't happen by avoiding our wounds, but by allowing God to transform them. As always, thank you for allowing me to be a small part of your journey. Until next time, take care of your heart, give yourself grace, and remember you don't have to heal alone. I'll see you in the next episode. This has been Dear Jordan, Letters to My Daughter.